September 1st, 1939, near Krojanty, Pomerania, Poland. Dawn broke slowly over the flat farmland west of the Tukola forest. A thin ground fog clung to the fields. The air was cool. The soil was still wet from the night's rain. Crows circled above the harvested wheat stubble. Horses shifted quietly in the mist. At 4:40 in the morning, German artillery opened fire along the entire Polish frontier. Within minutes, the Second World War had begun. Across northern Poland, long columns of the German 19th Panzer Corps pushed eastward. Their objective was the Vistula River crossings. Their timetable was ruthless. Their doctrine was new. Their method was violent. And their name would soon become known to the world. Blitzkrieg. Ahead of them, scattered across villages and hedgerows, stood the Polish 18th Pomeranian Ulan Regiment. Cavalrymen, many of them mounted, holding blocking positions against mechanized forces advancing at full speed. By nightfall, one of those Polish units would execute a maneuver that German war correspondents would mock, and later quietly stop laughing about. The opening of the invasion. Germany's plan for the Polish campaign was direct and uncompromising. 3 massive army groups would converge on Warsaw. More than 1.5 million German troops would cross the frontier. They were supported by 2,700 tanks, over 2,000 aircraft, and a fully motorized logistics system. Poland, by contrast, could field barely 600,000 frontline troops, with only 180 light tanks and limited mechanized transport. Much of her army still moved by rail, wagon, and horse. The imbalance was obvious, but the campaign would not unfold as cleanly as Berlin expected. The Pomeranian Corridor. In the north, German Fourth Army, under General Günther von Kluge, pushed toward the Baltic coast. Their aim was to sever the so-called Polish Corridor, isolating Poland from the sea and linking East Prussia with the German mainland. The Polish Pomorze Army, under General Władysław Bortnowski, was tasked with delaying this thrust as long as possible. His units were outnumbered. They were outgunned. They were ordered to fight anyway. Among those units was the 18th Pomeranian Uhlans, a professional cavalry regiment stationed near Krojanty, commanded by Colonel Kazimierz Mastalers. The role of Polish cavalry. By 1939, Polish cavalry was not ceremonial. They were trained as mobile infantry. They fought on foot. They used horses for speed and maneuver. They carried anti-tank rifles, machine guns, 37mm Bofors anti-tank guns, and modern field radios. Their sabers were not battlefield curiosities. They were close combat tools for breaking enemy infantry under very specific conditions. And on the afternoon of September 1st, near the village of Krojanty, conditions became very specific. Contact at Krojanty. Shortly after 4 p.m., Polish reconnaissance reported a German infantry battalion of the 20th Motorized Division resting in a clearing near the Chojnice-Rydal Road. They were unprepared. They had no armored support forward. They were halted to reorganize their column. Colonel Mastalers immediately recognized the opportunity. If the German infantry could be disrupted, the Polish retreat routes eastward would remain open for several more hours. Those hours could save entire formations from encirclement. Mastalers ordered 2 squadrons, approximately 250 cavalrymen, to prepare an attack. They would strike fast, break the German formation, then withdraw before armored support could respond. The decision was not romantic. It was tactical. The charge at approximately 6 p.m., Polish cavalry moved from the tree line. They advanced at a trot, then at full gallop, sabers drawn. The German infantry, caught completely off guard, scattered. Within moments, the Polish riders were among them. Eyewitness accounts from both sides confirmed the same result. The German unit broke in disorder. Dozens were killed. Dozens more fled. The Polish squadrons had succeeded. But then, from the south, German armored cars and light tanks arrived. Elements of the 20th Motorized Division's reconnaissance group. Machine gun fire swept the clearing. Colonel Mastalers was mortally wounded while covering the withdrawal. The Polish cavalry disengaged and retreated into the forest. They had not charged tanks. They had charged infantry. But the consequences of what followed would be distorted for decades. The first 48 hours. The German advance in the Pomeranian Corridor slowed. Polish delaying actions at Krojanty, Tukola, and Świętowo forced repeated redeployments. German columns compressed. Traffic jams formed. Bridges were contested. By the night of September 2nd, German timetables were already slipping. The expected breakthrough toward the Vistula had stalled for nearly 48 hours. Berlin would never admit why. September 2nd, 1939. Tukola Forest, northern Poland. Morning fog hung low over the forest floor. The pine needles were wet. Smoke from the previous day's fighting drifted slowly between the trees. German advance units were still trying to reassemble their columns. Roads that were supposed to carry 3 divisions forward in a single day were now clogged, with wrecked vehicles, displaced infantry, artillery pieces searching for new firing positions, and convoys of wounded moving west. Officers of the 19th Panzer Corps recorded in their war diaries that progress through the corridor had fallen behind schedule. Fuel trucks were delayed. Bridge engineers had not reached forward crossings on time. Forward reconnaissance had lost contact with several battalions overnight. The first fracture in the Blitzkrieg timetable had appeared. German planners had expected the Polish front in Pomerania to collapse within hours. Instead, they found themselves fighting through forests, villages, and narrow farm roads, defended by small, mobile Polish units that refused to disintegrate. The Pomor's army, although outnumbered, conducted systematic delaying actions. Units withdrew in measured stages, destroying bridges, blocking roads, and forcing German columns to redeploy again and again. Each delay compounded the next. What had been planned as a 24-hour breakthrough was now stretching toward a third day. That afternoon, German war correspondents arrived at Krojanty. They saw dead horses, they saw fallen Polish cavalrymen, they saw armored vehicles in the distance. From this, a story was born. German newspapers reported that Polish cavalry had foolishly charged tanks with sabers. The claim was false, but it was useful. It portrayed German mechanized superiority. It humiliated the enemy. It masked the fact that German infantry had been routed the day before by mounted troops using shock, speed, and surprise. The myth spread. Within weeks, it was repeated across Europe. By the evening of September 2nd, the Polish Pomor's army received orders to disengage and fall back toward the Vistula. They had accomplished their mission. They had delayed the German timetable. They had prevented immediate encirclement of several Polish divisions. They had preserved retreat corridors that would otherwise have collapsed. The cost had been severe. The 18th Pomeranian Uhlans had lost over a third of their men. Colonel Mastelers had died of his wounds, but the corridor remained open for another critical day. On September 3rd, German forward units finally forced a breakthrough east of the forest. By then, the planned link-up with southern German forces had been delayed by nearly 48 hours. Those 48 hours mattered. They allowed Polish armies in the center to reposition. They allowed the evacuation of equipment and wounded. They forced German high command to revise timetables across the entire northern front. The first cracks in the Blitzkrieg model had appeared not in France, but in Poland. Within weeks, Poland would fall. The disparity in manpower, armor, and air power was too great, but the early phase of the campaign exposed something Berlin would never publicly admit. The Blitzkrieg was not invincible. It could be slowed. It could be disrupted. And on September 1st through 3rd, 1939, it had been by men on horseback. For decades, the image of Polish cavalry charging tanks became a symbol of outdated warfare. It was a lie. The truth was more uncomfortable. At Krojanty, mounted soldiers had struck German infantry with precision, broken their formation, disrupted their advance, and forced the first delay of the Second World War. They were not reckless. They were effective. The delay of nearly 48 hours at the opening of the war did not change Poland's fate, but it shaped the campaign. It exposed weaknesses. And it proved that even the most modern armies remain vulnerable to terrain, timing, and human resistance. When historians speak of Blitzkrieg, they speak of speed, shock, and overwhelming force. They should also remember the riders of Krojanty, who faced the new age of war with old weapons and unbreakable discipline and held it back, if only for a moment.